Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown, out on the edge of the prairie. It was kind of a hot summer here for a couple of weeks back in August, and those Norwegians got all pale and enervated and were gasping for breath like fish on a stringer, and you had to worry about them. There were a lot of people who went down to the lake to cool off, people who said they would never be caught dead in a swimsuit, and when you saw them you could see why, but they were there. And then thank goodness this cold front came in to rescue us from summer, and now everything is fine again. The acorns are falling and the gray squirrels are collecting them, and the farmers are out getting their cutting of corn stalks for silage, and school starts on Tuesday in Lake Wobegon, and business has been brisk down at Skoglund's Five and Dime, and they're going down there to pick up their pencils and their tablets and their pens and everything else, and over to the Mercantile for the jeans and the sweatshirts, and things are getting geared up for school again. The children got their class schedules in the mail, so they're studying them very carefully and trying to figure out where their friends will be and who they'll be sitting next to, especially when you move from middle school on up to high school. It's a huge jump, and you worry about where you're going to land in all of this confusion and chaos. All these kids, deep down underneath, think of themselves as oddballs and nerds and dorks, and everybody feels the same way. They hide this under this sort of cool nonchalance on top, and we wish them well as they go off to school. Summer's over, and that's a good thing. We could only bear so much of it. These perfect days put you under this terrible obligation to enjoy every single last minute, and this is more than we're used to in Lake Wobegon. People say it's a beautiful day out today, and yes, of course it is. And yesterday was too, and the day before, and it just goes on, and all of this perfect weather, and it just raises questions in a Christian's mind whether heaven is really something we're going to enjoy, or if it's going to be like one of those vacations that you're sort of glad when it comes to an end. I mean, you look forward to vacations too, as people look forward to heaven, but perfection can get tiring after a while, and the no tears policy, that's fine, and no suffering, that's okay, but it's the praising all the time, and are we going to enjoy this? I mean, you could have ice cream for breakfast, and it would be wonderful for the first week, and then the second week, it would be so-so, and then after that, it would be this terrible burden that you're bearing. And who will we be in heaven? Will we be ourselves? I doubt that very much. We'll be transformed into heavenly beings, and if we are transformed into heavenly beings, then most of the people I like will not be there, probably. I'll be missing a lot of very interesting people. Unitarians probably not going to be there. They'll probably boycott heaven because it discriminates against atheists, and without Unitarians there, I just think heaven is going to lack a loyal opposition. You think about heaven as summer wears on, and it raises doubts in your mind, and then this cold front moves in, and it solves all of your problems, and at last we have something to struggle with, which is the meaning of our lives. After all, people don't tell stories about their most wonderful day, do they? No, they don't. They tell stories about disaster and about the night the bed fell, and the night Grandma fell down the back stairs, and all of that. What are we going to do in heaven? There's not going to be a lot of storytelling going on. It just raises doubts in your mind. Attendance has been light at Lake Wobegon Lutheran Church, and Pastor Liz has been preaching a sort of a gentle sermon, not coming down too hard on the gospel. When there's so few people there in the sanctuary, they're apt to take preaching personally, so you don't want to come at them too hard. Pastor Liz, our new pastor in Lake Wobegon, is easing into the job gradually. She has come up with a couple of new things. The choir practice is now being held at the Sidetrack Tap, and is done over the objection of Tibby Markland, who is the music director, the choir director, who felt that things could very easily get out of hand. But the choir sounds better after they've had a couple of beers. And Martin Luther did feel that the righteous could use a good stiff drink now and then. He felt that beer was not an enemy. He was no Puritan, and they sound good. Standing on the Promises, sung in the Sidetrack Tap, has a real movement to it. And when they sing, "It is well with my soul," it sounds as if there really is something well with their soul. It's a little wrinkle that she's put. She's thought of having men's Bible study in the Sidetrack Tap as well. But Wally, the bartender, tried to talk her out of it, and he said that the clientele at the Sidetrack Tap is sort of like a club, and the men who go to Bible study are the people that his clientele are trying to get away from. So if they couldn't go to the Sidetrack Tap anymore, then they probably would go to the Sidewinder out in the country, which is kind of a wild, open bar where they'd be drinking without any adult supervision, and probably wind up in a ditch somewhere, and it would all be the fault of the Bible study group. She sat there at the bar, drinking a liter of beer and listening to him, and there was something about Pastor Liz that was attractive to Wally, who has been able to resist Lutheran pastors in the past. She's not a beautiful woman. She's tall and she's dark hair, and I guess you could call her handsome. But she sat there looking across the bar at him, and there was something so patient and so kind about her that it just gave you the feeling that she was listening to you and understood you, even if you hadn't said a thing. Even if you were silent, she could hear your silence. She had this patience and quiet about her, which is what we look for in a Lutheran pastor. We don't look for brilliance or charisma. Brilliance depends on who's writing the test. Charisma is an illusion. It just is a matter of lighting. It just depends on the time of day, the angle. But patience and kindness, we're always capable of, even in our worst moments. She had a campfire out behind the parsonage the other night after the cold front had moved in, and people just headed that way. And there was a big fire, birch and maple logs, and then some oak logs, and the fire rose up, and people were roasting marshmallows and wieners over it and standing around the fire, and then somebody would toss on another log and sparks would fly up into the sky and smoke would rise, and people stood around the fire, and as the flames flew up, their faces were illuminated, and suddenly we seemed like a migratory tribe of people here on the northern plains, and we were arming ourselves against winter, which is coming on and which draws us together. This is the force that draws us together, and the fact that we need each other now that nature is trying to push us out and show us that we're not wanted here, and trying to kill us off a few times in January and February. We need each other. We dearly need each other. And this is so clear to us standing around this fire behind the parsonage. You don't have to preach on it. You just feel it, that we depend on each other. Somebody started singing America the Beautiful, and they all sang, and then they sang How Great Thou Art, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. This is why people go into matrimony. Even though they see a lot of other cars are in the ditch, they still go down that road. And because we need each other. And if you are two instead of one, then you can take turns being the optimist. Hard times in our country, and we need a little optimism, and you can take turns with it. I'm an optimist about our country. Most people with 12-year-old daughters are obligated to be optimists. We are a good people. We are a people of inventors and innovators, people who are used to solving problems and getting ourselves out of difficulty. And if we would just stop yelling at each other for a couple of hours, we might be able to do that. Winter, it's here, and it's killed off the horseflies and the deer flies and those mosquitoes. They've all gone elsewhere. We don't know where. Have a good winter. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average.